The last lesson I set you was to do with what caused the Boer War. So in 1886, gold is discovered in the Boer states. So Cecil Rhodes sees this as an opportunity. He opens dozens of gold mines inside the Boer territory, and thousands of British workers end up flooding the area, and soon the Boers feel their land is under threat. Now this is ultimately what starts the Second Boer War. Second Boer War is probably the most important one, and that is from 1899 until 1902. Now the Boer army, like you saw last lesson, they absolutely stun the British with it. So these in the middle are kind of typical Boer soldiers. Now if you look at what they've got, they don't really look as if they're in the army. They use guerrilla style tactics. They don't have a particular headquarters, they don't have a particular uniform, so they're really hard to be able to identify. So we just spoke about what caused, the Second Boer War, but we'll look at what caused the First Boer War. Now First Boer War is in 1867 until 1881. Diamonds are discovered in the Boer states. So if you think about which factor has been the most significant, for this one, for both wars, it has got to be economic resources. Ultimately, they are fighting over diamonds and gold. Now, for your Boer War, in January 1900, the British respond to their losses by sending 500,000 troops to fight about 50,000 Boer soldiers. The British Army used really high-tech weaponry, so things like machine guns, modern rifles and high explosive shells, yet the Boers refused to surrender and carry out lots of small raids on British camps. And the British respond savagely. Now what they respond with is something called the scorched earth policy. Now you'll definitely know who does this. There's a man called General Kitchener, or Lord Kitchener, he's later on known as, and he's the person in the pictures that says your country needs you, and he's pointing towards you. Now he is responsible for that scorched earth policy, and that means that British soldiers are instructed to burn down Boer farms, kill the animals, destroy the crops, and also poison drinking wells. Then the Boer men, women and children and their black servants are rounded up and placed into concentration camps. Now this is what I want to look at today, the lessons that we can learn from the Boer War. Now peace is achieved by 1902. Both sides are absolutely exhausted after years of brutal fighting, and eventually the Boers are forced to surrender and peace talks begin. And it is agreed that the Boer states would become British colonies, but the Boers were promised that they would make many of the key decisions in running their lands. So in 1910, the Boer states join up with places like Cape Colony, for example, and they form South Africa. Now this is classed as a dominion rather than a colony because it runs its own affairs. So what I would probably do with this is I would get down what the scorched earth policy is, what a concentration camp is, and also what the Union of South Africa is. So what I want to look at now is what we learn from the Boer. This is like Rhodesia. Now Rhodesia is named after Cecil Rhodes. And these places where initially the gold and the diamonds are formed. Now the Cape of Good Hope is here, this bottom bit, and you've got to remember that at this time they've only just really got the Suez Canal. So Suez Canal is all the way at the top near Egypt. So they want that control of it there so that Britain will be able to come all the way around and then travel up to the Indian Ocean and up through India, and they've got somewhere they can stop off. Now what I would probably do with this is there's going to be 5 different lessons that they learn. So I would probably make notes on these. You can type them up, you could write them in your book, but I please ask you to maybe send a picture of them to me so I can see what notes you're making, so I can see you're actually doing the work. Let's take this second one then. This is to do with the cost. Now Britain ended up spending £200 million on fighting the Boers. The British also forced to pay £3 million in reparations to the Boer people that they had defeated. Now this money was supposed to go to people whose land and farms and the British military had destroyed, but the British also promised that they're going to give some sort of limited government to them, hence why they are known as a dominion. Now a dominion is it's like a semi-independent country. Now it's part of the British Empire, but it ultimately has its own government, so it can say its own laws. Now, the treatment. Treatment for this is how they treat the Boer people. Now, this reminds me of Nazi Germany. We have got to remember that there's links between these. Now, the term concentration camps has first been used to describe the British camps set up to house the British refugees and prisoners of war, so POWs. Camps are overcrowded, they've used that scorched earth policy, they've got nowhere else to live. Food is really, really scarce. Yeah, looking at these just makes me feel so sad. And how could we have done that to these people? Disease is really, really common. There's outbreaks of measles and cholera. Housing is limited, so people live in tents. And 26,000 women and children die in these camps, with 50% of all Boer children dying. Now, there's public outcry in Britain because people are so furious that this is how Britain are treating people. Okay. Political. So the Conservatives win the 1900 election because they promised the Boer War is going to be easy to win. But by 1906, that is becoming increasingly difficult to be able to maintain. So in 1906, it's this man, David Lloyd George, who gets into power, and he is the man that later on goes to sign the Treaty of Versailles. So what I would do with this information then is I would go through, I would make some notes on it and make sure that you understand the significance of the Boer War.